Hello and welcome to a guide of Mother Ostankya of Kislev. I guess it's Ostankya or Ostankaya, I don't know now. So, I went through the initial turns, I checked how this faction plays out and how different or similar it is to Tsarina, Kostaltin's or Boris's faction. So in the end I'll give you some army compositions as well that I would like to try out, and you can change and adapt those to your own playstyle. Like I always mentioned, this is not intended to be an in-depth guide, although it has elements of it, and you'll certainly have a better grasp of the faction in the end. So let's play with Mother Ostankya of Kislev. So for your short victory objective, very simple, you need to obtain 3 of the forbidden hexes. It's this mechanic right here. Now, the reward is plus 3 hero capacity for all heroes, which has now a little bit of an increase in value as you have a new hero, the Hag Witch, especially useful considering the mechanics of the Ice Court as well. So, speaking a little bit of this campaign, it takes a while to get these three hexes, of course, and it will depend on, you're going to progress through the campaign, and then certainly you're going to have the quests, basically, or the missions to obtain those hexes. It's still a short campaign by all means, so it can be considered a short campaign. Now, in terms of long campaign, you need to achieve the short victory conditions and then obtain all the other ones, all the other hexes. So you need to obtain the 5 hexes and the main hexes as well. And of course you have a final battle to do. And this is a good one because it doesn't have any of those occupy, loot, razor sack settlements. It's very quick. Actually, this is a very quick, long campaign victory even. Then you get the reward of plus 10 hero recruit rank, which is excellent to ensure that your heroes are always much more powerful at the start. So Mother Ostankya, she leads the Spirits of the Forest, benefits from Winds of Magic Power Reserve Capacity plus 1 for each resource producing building. This is excellent. The more resource production buildings you have, the better. Then you have Global Recruitment Duration minus 1 for Incarnate, Elemental of Beasts, so encouraging you to get those. Melee attack plus 8 when fighting against armies that spread corruption. I hear you. What's her name? Marathi. Yeah, she's really good at fighting Marathi because of this, actually. Melee defense plus 10 for spider hatchlings and giant spider units to all armies. It should be noted that this is for all armies, which is excellent. It does encourage you to use a little bit more of those units overall. Now, this creates a rather unique playstyle, and more to that when we talk about the mechanics and the location. Now, in terms of climates, it's much better than other Kislev factions overall. Let me show you here. Because she doesn't have a lot of uninhabitable, and more specifically, which is interesting, she doesn't have the uninhabitable chaos. So she's really good at dominating the whole map. Just the desert, it's kind of like one of the demon factions, really. So it's really a much better faction to conquer the whole map than any other Kislev faction, really. So I really like her for a full map domination campaign. Your starting location is a minor settlement on a 4-settlement province. However, you do not have access to most buildings until you have an alliance or control over Prague or Erengrad or Kislev. You can be allied with the Kislevite owner so that you can construct this building. So this creates a little bit of an issue. Now, you are surrounded, more on that later, but you're surrounded by enemies, especially all of the Dark Elves, really. You can get some alliances with some of them, but for the most part, you're going to get them as enemies, and allies, of course, with the High Elves. So, taking some of the sea goodies that you may find around here in the sea, it's probably detrimental for early campaign success as well. So, typical expansion is a no-brainer. You go south. You dominate the whole province, then you go against Marathi, after which it's really up to you. You can go even further south against Exoto. You can go north and try to capture all those places. Maybe someone starts attacking you from the north. You can even go into Ulthuan if you would wish, but it's really up to you. After this point in time, I believe the most typical expansion is really just to dominate this whole area, getting rid of these 2 Dark Elf factions, and then it's really up to you. Just remember to be attacking enemies that actually spread corruption to gain that benefit, okay? Diplomatically, you're part of the Order Tide. So High Elves, Bretonnia, the Empire, they should become your friends, while Dark Elves and anything that is typically an evil or chaotic faction will become your enemies. So other chaos, the vampire coast, likely they'll become your enemies, or anything that is fighting actually your allies, of course. Skaven, for instance, is also a choice of an enemy for sure. So therefore, for outposts, just count on the good old Alberic giving you some nice cavalry, some good artillery there, of course, if you need. From the Empire as well, some artillery, some Demigryph Knights will always be excellent. And for the High Elves, you can also consider some of their infantry as well, because you don't have access to a lot of it especially in the early to mid game, so don't count those out, as well as any single entities or cavalry. So overall, you do have a couple of options for those outposts. Just be sure that you count on those to get even more balanced armies if you wish. In terms of mechanics, there's a lot of changes for Mother Ostankya. Number one, what she doesn't have devotion, and she doesn't have that typical motherland mechanics. So none of those none of that race to confederation, nothing like that. She has a completely different playstyle. First, this is important, she cannot build everything I already mentioned until she owns or has an alliance with whoever is controlling Kislev, Erengrad or Prague. So it's very useful to at least get a hero, get some contact with the Kislevites to try and get that alliance as quick as possible. It doesn't need to have that building there. All that you need is to have an alliance with whoever is owning that to be able to build even a couple of these buildings. So otherwise, you do have some options for buildings in terms of military, but that's the important part. You kind of need these in order to even progress through the campaign. Now, the ice mechanic, the ice court mechanic still works well, ensuring that you get both casted heroes and lords. These are unlocked with the research, and you're able to choose their starting traits, which is excellent for a varied and some more focused play style as well. The Spirit Essence, this is your unique currency. You gain this via battles mostly, and also by having lower corruption and some magical forests. Now, I have 5 main hexes that you'll be unlocking throughout the campaign. These are Purification Chant, which removes all corruption from the target province. You have Coven's Curse Mark, which targets an enemy army, reducing movement range. Winds of Magic cost for spells gets increased for them, and it disables March, used underway and teleportation. So basically, that's an army for you to kill. That's very easy. That's the idea. Then you have this very interesting one, which allows you to teleport a target army to a magical forest. Yes, you have teleport to magical forests, which is excellent. You can go back to Kislev if you wish. Now, you also have the Bewitching Lure, gaining income from the target settlement's income, just to ensure that you target someone that, an enemy settlement that actually has a lot of it. And finally, you have Recreant Spirit. Gives an army consisting of things in the woods, incarnate elemental of beasts, and elemental bears, which will be summoned to the target settlement's owner territory every other turn. This is really powerful. They kind of work like rights with the Spirit Essence cost. Now, the other mechanic is the Witch's Hut. So this allows you to create either blessings or curses, depending on the trinkets that you have been locating. So you obtain these trinkets, as you can see there, with, for instance, forming an alliance with or defeating a Greenskin's army in battle. And if you're using those to a blessing, it gives one effect. If you're using them to a curse, it gives a different effect. So overall, what are you going to do with these ones? Well, you're going to use them during battle. You're either going to use this, similar to banners, you're going to put this on one of your forces, of course the blessings ones, or you're going to put the curses in one of the enemies, which is excellent. You can just make sure that that enemy suddenly is much weaker for against you. For instance, I can give the rampage and less melee defense to any units, so that's excellent. That's something that I'm going to use to ensure that I can fight off the next battle. So that's a cool idea here. Then Mother Ostankya, she also has a unique part of the research tree, which is this, the Tales from the Woods. Now this mainly affects her specific units, and it also costs spirit as well, but it allows her to proceed a little bit without necessarily ever having to go back to Kislev, really. So some of this also gives her different empowered hexes, so it changes the typical hexes that you have to more powerful ones. And in terms of the typical one, instead of having to own, you can see that you can gain the Spirit of Kislev here to progress through the tech tree. So that's a good idea here. Just you spend some of this spirit essence, and then you can access that without having to go back to Kislev. A nice addition, so that you can have still those techs with Mother Ostankya. So in terms of province edicts, you have a control and less reduced campaign movement range one. You have an income from all buildings, a chance of plague spreading reduced, more hero recruit rank, less corruption, and less hero recruitment cost. So perfect when you're about to recruit a hero. You can combine this with the ice court mechanic, so that you can ensure that when you're recruiting that hero, then it gets that rank. So about the time that you're completing one of those ice court mechanics with the heroes, then you can apply this on the province that you're going to hire her, so that you can get a little bit more rank. Always remember that. And then we have the recruitment cost minus 10% and local recruitment capacity plus 2. Remember that this is plus 2. It's actually significant enough for you to use, as I've used here. This is the one that I've applied, just so that it can get a full army much faster, really much faster. In terms of army specifics, so you can have the army stances, the channeling, more Winds of Magic Power Reserve in exchange for 10% range. Then you have Encamp, costing 50% movement, with enabling replenishment, access to global recruitment, and giving immunity to attrition, which is always nice. You also have Raiding, 50% movement costs, but giving you immunity to attrition as well as the income, of course. And then we have Ambush, which costs 25% movement, but allows you to be hidden, of course, to try to ambush the enemy, and Forced March. Typical ones, of course. These are the ones that you're going to be using, and for the most part you're going to need, especially the encamp one, to try and global recruit a lot, especially once you have some of those buildings, in case, you know, the Kislev loses the alliances that you lose, then you can't recruit or build all those buildings, so you may have to use global recruitment a little bit more. And of course, one mechanic, I'm going to talk about it right now, one mechanic is that you can actually recruit different units, such as the 4 giant spiders, cave bats, and spider hatchlings. Actually, I can talk a bit about it in the buildings next. In terms of buildings, there's a special building, the Ostankya's Hut over here, which gives you Spirit Essence per turn, less cost for hexes, income generated, and more diplomatic relations with Kislev. This will help you getting that alliance, so that you can unlock the buildings, the typical buildings from Kislev, because, well, you don't have access to them, as I've spoken. You really need to control either Kislev, Erengrad, or Prague, or be allied with anyone that controls them, as long as they're from Kislev, of course, to construct these. Only to construct. It doesn't disallow it. So as long as you have constructed it, then you're fine. Okay. So in terms of military, let me go to the main one. In terms of military, therefore you only have 2 of the 7 available, and all require province capital to build up to the highest tier, of course. Should you acquire access to all Kislev units, then you have 7 military buildings, with only 2 being able to build fully in minor settlements. In terms of infrastructure in settlements, you have a income, growth, and less recruitment costs. You have a replenishment rate, more ambush success chance, less corruption, and more income from farms. You have a control and growth. You also have the Orthodoxy Church for more control and less corruption, and the recruitment of patriarchs, of course. This is also locked. You need to control Kislev, Erengrad, or Prague, so you don't have access to the nice patriarchs initially. That's a bummer. And then you have the basically income building that you can have, plus the tradable resources. It's always nice. So these are good options for any specific situations, and especially because she doesn't have a lot of building necessities for military, your provinces can actually grow really fast and grant you some good income easily. So you should embrace this fact. You know, for the most part, you do have enough of a roster to perform well into the mid game, really. because of the new units are really good, and you have some different playstyle, really, especially with outposts is definitely possible. So yeah, it's still a nice one. Now, in terms of the research, we already talked a little bit about it, but it's quite good now. Mother Ostankya has a special part of this tech tree. It also gives some nice bonuses for those specific units, and there's an additional one, which is this one, which gives snipe for Akshina ambushers. They are already very overpowered with snipe. Come on, just bring a couple of them. You're gonna be fine with those guys. So, but still, of course, all the tech tree gives a lot of bonuses. Make sure that you plan those out, and especially make sure that you have a little bit here to unlock the Ice Court training slots for Ice Witch Lords, of course, and for the for the Frost Maiden heroes, of course. So be wary of that. In terms of skills, well, you have always your basic ones, the specific legendary lord ones, the yellow line or melee or caster. In this case, it's caster for Mother Ostankya. She has a nice different combined shadow and beasts magic. So it's really cool, lore of magic. So she has a mixed lore of magic, which is really cool. It works really well. Then you have, of course, the red line skills or army, and the blue line or campaign. Starting with the blue line, you do have reduced upkeep over here, and you have the replenishment, which I always like to have. You still have the less attrition here in the early one, which is kind of like the one that I take to be sure that there's no issues with attrition, even though her faction kind of doesn't suffer too much, because you can reduce all that corruption in an instant if you wish. But still, it may be one of your possibilities, or maybe you just want to reduce corruption slower, or maybe you want just less recruitment cost. It's really up to you. Red line is one of the best, actually, and now it is improved with the new units, because you do get all those new units, and Creatures of the Land now has a lot more possibilities, which is excellent. So yeah, overall you can field very good armies even with the restrictions for Ostankya without spending too many red line skills, which is always excellent. Patriarchs are now difficult to obtain, so for the most part you'll have to resort to hag witches. These can still provide some nice benefits for your armies, especially here with some stalk for things in the woods and incarnate elemental beasts, and all those other effects, which is always excellent, let alone that they provide and cast spells and assist your lords. So here are all the red line skills for the Kislev armies. A good note is that they are great combinations of armor-piercing missiles and anti-large, even just in a few skill points, which helps a lot. So yeah, overall it's a very nice one to have, because you're not going to need too many skill points to buff a ton of units so that you can have some good combinations. Mother Ostankya kind of changes a lot. So she has advantages for all creatures of the forest, really. So you can use many armies just focusing on those creatures, of course. Even though they are, for the most part, not late game ones, the ones that are late game are kind of like available for all the Kislevs. So as in the things in the woods and the incarnate elementals, those are the ones that are available for everyone. She also gives magical attacks to the whole army, which is excellent, especially if you're going to attack some demons. By all means, that's what you should have and should aim. So the first army here is very quick to obtain in the campaign. It's really easy to obtain this, and it's a little bit of a nice army to have early game with a lot of flexibility. The Akshina are always so good in the campaign. Overall, you don't really need anything to hold the line, because whenever someone is holding the line, they're already depleted because of the Akshina. They can hide, and you can send in the things in the woods. That's the sort of idea here. And you can even have the single entities to screen against enemy single entities, so that's good. And then this is kind of like an upgraded version of that one, especially with using the incarnate elementals with the things in the woods as a front line, really, with these guys just peppering down the enemy with missiles. Or later on, when you have some access to some Kislev units, then by all means you can just bring up some shielded units, especially against those heavily missile factions. That should cause some effect. Note how they are quite effective in terms of redline skills. You don't need too many to actually benefit your whole army. Now, I'll still provide you, of course, with some basic recommendations for the previous army ideas. Okay, but let's mix some of these. Note how effective they are in terms of redline skills, which is excellent. Of course, by all means, mix and max whatever you wish. This is just a couple of the ideas. This is the idea for sweeper armies, basically just cheaper armies that you can use without too much. You can definitely trade off the Streltsy with the Akshina ambushers because they're kind of better overall, but by all means this also implies that you only need one of those buildings, so you may wish to build those up nevertheless. Now these are some additions to your armies as well, in terms of what you can use. Mixing those units, of course. The incarnate elementals of beasts kind of do replace the elemental bears a little bit. They're not as tanky, but they do a little bit more damage, so you may prefer them. But it's up to you to either use these or use the elemental bear as you prefer. Note, of course, the elemental bear does have that nice breath attack. Maybe that's the choice that you're going to go for. But overall, these armies should do just fine. This is more of an ambush style, very fast army, still with the snipe ability. These guys can just remain hidden while the part of your forces is just going head on against the enemy. So yeah, overall, notice how effective they are in terms of redline skills. Plenty of combinations that you can use without spending too much, so that your heroes, so that your lords, sorry, have more skill points available for anything else. So Mother Ostankya changes a lot from what you consider a typical Kislev playthrough, and I think for the better, actually. No devotion, no motherland mechanics, and instead her unique idea and location for a lot of possible variety, actually. However, the fact that she has no access to other Kislev units early on is also a problem, especially for Immortal Empires, because you're farther away from those Kislev factions and locations. It makes her a little bit inflexible until you can obtain that alliance or go back to have a foothold in Kislev, Prague, or Erengrad. She pays her uniqueness with less options in terms of units, which implies that after the first playthrough you may not be inclined to play with her again. Really, not that much. You know, in terms of variety of playstyle, she's good, but maybe just one or two playthroughs and you'll find. That's my opinion. Hexes are still quite interesting to use and fun. Especially the main one that causes some variety is this teleport. You can teleport to any magical forest, which is great. That implies that you do have some variety, but still not the best in terms of, you know, having multiple campaigns of her. You can find a lot of possibilities for those, and your enemies will surely suffer while your forces feel suddenly superior, especially with the blessings, with the curses. This is an excellent mechanic that I really love to use. Now, you're gonna suddenly surprise the enemy as well, because by the time that you reach an enemy, this is a nice thing. When you fight an enemy, or they try to fight you, they don't know that you have the hexes. So suddenly they assume that they are going to be able to win, and then you hex the whole army of them, or you hex your own army, or you benefit your own army, and suddenly you have the better advantage. So that's a nice niche part of this mechanic that is not, it's easily overlooked, that I like to mention. So, your army consists of, and I'll include the Kislev basics here, good hybrid infantry, great cavalry, great single entities and monstrous infantry, good chariots. It does lack early access to most unit roster, and it has a difficult early army composition. Now, replenishment is great. She has much better climate overall. This is a much easier campaign to do full map completion than any other Kislev lords for certain. So, time to hex away with Mother Ostankya of Kislev.